Creative babble.
Woke up in the middle of the night in a dead panic and saying his name starts with a D, his name starts with a D.
This is audio from LaDonna Humphrey's documentary titled Uneven Ground, the Melissa Witt story. In the documentary, LaDonna features a witness who was at the bowling alley the day that Melissa Witt disappeared. The witness said that they heard a big argument in the parking lot. The person didn't make the connection right away, but when police discovered Melissa Witt's car, that's when they called to make their report. Alicia Lockhart recalls a time when LaDonna hired a hypnotist to try to unblock any memories the witness had that day.
During that process, the witness recounted what she saw and heard of the abduction.
Two former Fort Smith police detectives were present, J.C. Ryder and Chris Boyd. So this is far from an official police investigation.
Melissa Witt was fighting with a man named Daniel, and she was saying, "Stop, leave me alone. You and your little girlfriend just get out of here." There was like a white truck, so it sounds like Melissa Witt may have been abducted by a man named Daniel and his girlfriend in a white truck.
Y'all know how I feel about hypnosis. But let's play along here for a second. Who is the man named Daniel? And could he have anything to do with Melissa Witt's disappearance? The answer is no, because hypnosis is not a credible form of evidence. But that doesn't matter, because LaDonna Humphrey is zeroing in on this person named Daniel, and she's getting ready to pin Melissa Witt's murder on him with no evidence. I'm Javier Leiva, and this is Pretend. Stories about real people pretending to be someone else.
If you love chilling mysteries, unsolved cases, and a touch of mom-style humor, Moms and Mysteries is the podcast you've been searching for. Hey guys, I'm Mandy.
And I'm Melissa. Join us every Tuesday for Moms and Mysteries, your gateway to gripping, well-researched true crime stories. Each week, we deep dive into a variety of mind-boggling cases as we shed light on everything from heists to whodunits. We're your go-to podcast for mysteries with a motherly touch. Subscribe now to Moms and Mysteries wherever you get your podcasts.
Alicia, LaDonna Humphrey, and two former detectives are sitting in a hotel room with a psychic and a person claiming to have heard an argument outside of the bowling alley the day Melissa Witt disappeared. This is not an official police investigation. It's more like a scene from Only Murders in the Building. The hypnotist guided the witness through a deep relaxation meditation and then questioned her. The witness said that Melissa was yelling, "Go away, Daniel. Leave me alone, Daniel. It's over, Daniel." Alicia says that they all looked at each other in shock. Daniel was the guy that they had been suspecting this entire time. Daniel Watson, Melissa Witt's ex-boyfriend. Listen, before you get too excited, even though LaDonna Humphrey and the former detectives were, quote, in shock, this was exactly the name they were hoping the witness would say. Alicia says that they went out to dinner right afterwards and they talked about it, and they were so excited. They were confident that they were going to arrest Daniel the next month. That arrest never happened. As a reminder, some courts allow hypnosis under strict conditions. I'm pretty sure that hypnosis conducted in a hotel room with a true crime sleuth and two former detectives wouldn't hold up very well as evidence. The scientific community largely agrees that hypnosis can make individuals more suggestible, which can lead to the creation of false memories or the distortion of actual memories. Alicia tells me that LaDonna befriended this witness and would often talk on the phone with her. Is it possible that the witness heard LaDonna's theories? What if LaDonna asked, could it have been Daniel Watson? That would be enough to taint the witness. But none of that mattered because she had all she needed to start her campaign against Melissa Witt's ex-boyfriend, Daniel Watson. Here's a voice memo LaDonna sent Alicia.
We've got some really good things set up with Brad. He's going to start bringing in Daniel's exes starting next week to, interview them and get information on the record. I'm going to go back up on the 13th and help with some of that, so we're making headway.
Brad, by the way, is Brad Marion, a current detective at the Fort Smith PD.
I think with the new evidence that came in, that I really do believe that Daniel Watson killed Melissa Witt. I really firmly do believe that. There's always a margin of error, but I do feel like that he is the one.
But listen, this wasn't just LaDonna's personal feeling about the case. She was gearing up to go public with this information. I'm going to read you a transcript from LaDonna's podcast, Extinguished. She said she specifically honed in on someone who fits the profile of the killer. She says that the FBI came up with a profile in Melissa's case, and they believed that she was kidnapped by someone very familiar with the area. They call them a beer-drinking country boy who most likely drove a truck and had anger issues and was most likely a womanizer. And she says the interesting thing is that there are at least 2 people in her diary that fit that bill. In this video that she sent Alicia Lockhart, LaDonna asked her young daughter who she thinks did it.
Hey, I need to ask you a question. So, who do you think killed Melissa Witt?
I'm not going to play you the daughter's response, but you'll never believe it. She guessed Randall or Daniel. Randall is the name of the director who shot Alicia's death fetish film, aka Fetish Master, and Daniel is Daniel Watson, Melissa's ex-boyfriend. I'm going to read you another clip from the Extinguished podcast. Her co-host, David McClam, asked her, who does LaDonna think killed Missy Witt? LaDonna goes on to list several suspects, but she doesn't believe that any of these men are responsible for Melissa Witt's murder. Instead, LaDonna believes that Melissa was killed by someone she knows, and honestly, someone that she had most likely dated before. I believe his name is in that diary. And I believe that that diary holds the key to this entire puzzle of who killed Melissa Witt. LaDonna stopped short of using Daniel Watson's name in public. But here's the thing. She doesn't have to say Daniel Watson's name in order to be held liable for defamation, as long as that person can be reasonably identified by others. And let's not forget, she's a public figure accusing him of murder. And her only evidence is that his name was written in his girlfriend's diary and that a witness heard an argument in a parking lot when she was a kid. This person didn't witness Daniel or Melissa fighting, and the only reason why she knows his name is because she was hypnotized in a hotel room. Hardly a smoking gun. For public figures like LaDonna, there needs to be proof of actual malice, meaning she's recklessly disregarding the truth. For whatever reason, be it fame, attention, whatever. The point is, not saying his name is not going to protect her. Just saying. So I called up Daniel Watson to see what he has to say about this. That is after the break.
You're a podcast listener, and this is a podcast ad. Reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Lips and Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a reproduced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience with Lips and Ads. Go to lipsandads.com now. That's LIBSYN ads.com.
Hey, Daniel, it's Javier.
Hey, how are you?
How's it going, man?
Yeah, thanks, man.
This is Daniel Watson. I asked him if he has ever been in contact with LaDonna Humphrey.
She she hit me up on Facebook or something and started talking about she was a victim's advocate and she believed that I was a victim in that whole case and that I'm one of the last surviving members of anybody that do miss it, that was close to Missy Witt at that time, or, that all of her family had died, and that she just wanted to touch base and see if I could give her any leads towards anybody who might would have wanted to hurt her. And I said, well, that's the thing about it. She was such a sweet girl. No one would want to hurt her. And I've already been over this with the FBI, the state police, Fort Smith police, Russellville police, and everybody. and my name, I've never been a suspect. I said, so there's not really anything for us to talk about.
And it's true. As far as I can tell, Daniel Watson has never been a suspect. But then again, I don't have carte blanche inside Fort Smith Police Department. Side note, I asked Fort Smith Police Department if they would allow me to see the evidence and watch the body video. They haven't returned my email. But let's get back to Daniel's story.
And then one time she came down. She asked me, she said, I'm driving through Russellville. Do you care if we have dinner? Sit down and have dinner? And she said, I'll buy. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. And we had dinner one night, and she, just asked all kinds of stuff.
At first, LaDonna was friendly, but that quickly changed.
And then it's, at some point it got to where I could tell that she was trying to set me up, get me to say something or slip, or, Daniel, if you have anything you're guilty about and you want to confess to me, just please, you're more than welcome to do it. I'm like, well, I mean, I don't really have anything, I don't really do much of anything to create a reason to need to confess.
Was she still being nice, or?
She's still, oh yeah, she's been nice to me pretty much the whole time. The last times I remember her doing it, she called me acting like she was crying and scared, saying that Fort Smith police had called her wanting my information so they could call me and put me under arrest for the murder of Missy Witt. And I was like, whoa. And at this point, I was done being nice to her. I was like, whoa, shut up, LaDonna, listen to me. I said, I need names and badge numbers. And she said, what? I said, I needed names and badge numbers of every person that you're talking about, because this is some BS. You get them, I need it right now. Give me the information. She was like, what? And I was like, you heard what I said. We're not going a step further in this relationship talking about anything else until you get me the names and badge numbers of any police officer in Fort Smith, Arkansas that says I did this and it's coming after me to arrest me. And I called her bluff, and she couldn't believe it. So she said, well, Daniel, you're getting mad at me for no reason. I said, no, I'm not getting mad at you for no reason. You're threatening me with the police. I'm getting mad at you for a reason.
Daniel said that phone call was a year and a half ago. LaDonna never did get back to him with those names and badge numbers.
So I don't know why I'm being accused of it or that. I think she's trying to do this so she can make money to pay for Christopher's lawsuit. You know what I mean?
Christopher's lawsuit, as in Anthony Christopher. Remember, LaDonna's former employee who sued LaDonna and won a $3.57 million judgment against her. LaDonna's shadow campaign to peg Daniel Watson and the murder of Melissa Witt wasn't limited to voice memos or even vague references in her books and podcasts. Oh no. Her wild theory was published by the U.S. Sun, a tabloid known for sensational journalism, celebrity gossip, and other pseudo-news. The headline read, quote, "He knows I know. I suspect my old roommate killed Melissa Witt." The article says that a former roommate urged Melissa Witt's killer to turn himself in. He also said he fears the killer is going to shoot him. They don't use the roommate's real name in the article. They use the pseudonym Nixon O'Neill. According to the article, the roommate Nixon O'Neill first met Melissa Witt's killer in 2001 through a mutual friend, and they eventually moved in together. As far as I know, this roommate wasn't interviewed by the Sun. This could be all according to one source referenced in the article. According to the article, Nixon O'Neill said his roommate had a dark side, especially when he was drunk or high. This Nixon O'Neill reportedly said that his roommate had a woman's Mickey Mouse watch hanging on the wall. When Nixon asked his roommate about the watch, his roommate replied, "Have you ever heard of Melissa Witt? I was actually seeing her at the time, and I got a Mickey Mouse watch and got her one because she really liked Disney stuff." The article ends with this quote, "It's just so damn sad," he said, "seeing this piece of shit get away with something like that." Here's what Daniel Watson had to say about the U.S. Sun article.
Just basically that the murderer had a roommate that he lived with who had a bad temper when he got messed up, had been with Missy or knew Missy, had the Missy Mouse watch of hers on the wall, on his wall or something, or had gotten one like it and put on the wall. And it's just weird. I think maybe she forwarded the story that she has in the Sun to my boss, because he just came out of nowhere. I don't know if he was just trying to keep me from getting mad at LaDonna, and maybe she sent it to him. But somehow he got that Sun or the Sun article about the roommate of this murderer that killed Missy Witt. That's the only reason why I know any of this is going on, because he came to me and said, "You need to figure out what this is and what's going on, because it sounds like that lady up in Fayetteville is causing somebody problems."
In her book, Connected by Fate, LaDonna recalls getting a mysterious one-sentence email. It read, quote, "Probably not relevant, but my old college roommate told me that he was meeting Melissa Witt the night she disappeared." LaDonna wrote in her typical dramatic flair, quote, "He removed his hat and sat down at our secluded table. As the ambient lighting cast shadows over our tense expressions, Nixon slid an envelope across the table. He said, 'It's all in there. Everything he told me about Melissa Witt.' I opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. Written on it was a name, one that I had seen before in Melissa Witt's diary. My eyes widened in shock. The man named on this paper was our unnamed suspect." Unquote. So I asked Daniel Watson if he knows the identity of Nixon O'Neill.
They used a friend of mine's initials in the fake name, and they're trying to tell me that my friend Nathan Oliver has been, he has been talking to her, albeit he has done things with her. And I've asked him, in the past, I've asked him if he's ever said, has she implicated me in this or anything? He's like, no, and no one has. But I don't know. It was just, and then when I found this, I said, "Are you doing a podcast saying that I killed somebody here in a couple of, in May sometime?" He said, "No." I said, "I've never been in the podcast, nor do I ever plan on being in the podcast." And I was like, "Okay."
Do you think he would do that to you? I mean, are you guys pretty close?
Historically, we've been really close. I will say this: she did hook him up with some girl that he dated for a little while and screwed around with. So maybe maybe she got to him through sex or something. Maybe he got drunk and said stuff and didn't realize what he was saying. You know what I mean?
And so, do you think she's going to pin this on you or something?
Well, she can try. She sure can try if she wants, but it's going to cost her a lot of money. And I have an alibi. I'm the FBI. I talked to the FBI 5 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, around there. He really didn't call to talk to me about Missy Witt or anything. He called to talk to me about LaDonna. They know what happened. They know way more than me or you or anybody. And the last time I talked to them, they were more asking me questions about her.
About LaDonna?
Yeah, it was more, the questions were more about her and had she been harassing me and blah, 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 than they were about Missy Witt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
I go, "You're the FBI. You're the one that knows everything. You got the file. You know that I'm not a suspect." And he goes, "Yeah, I know." I go, "Well, then why are you here?" He goes, "Well, because this LaDonna doing this, the books and the podcast, and she's saying she's gonna, tell us who the murderer is." And I'm like, as you should know as well as I do, that I've already been cleared along. I was never a suspect.
Were you ever a person of interest or anything? Like, did police ever question you when that?
Yeah, they did. They did. Because I think I might have been one of the last people she talked to on the phone before she disappeared.
So you were dating her like around the same time she went missing, or?
We did date. When we would go on physical dates, might have been like 4 times we did something. And if you were my friend from back then, you'd be like, "What's wrong with you, Watson?" Because I never really tried to do anything with her. As far as I knew, she was a virgin, and I tried treating her with respect and being nice to her, and I think that made her like me a lot. So,
where were you when she went missing?
I was at my parents' house that night.
And the police got proof and everything about that?
Oh yeah, it's documented.
Multiple witnesses say they saw Daniel Watson an hour away from Fort Smith, just like he said, at his parents' house. He told me he would have needed a helicopter to pull off the murder.
I'm not worried about her or being in trouble because I didn't do anything. So, like my dad always said, when you're right, you're right.
I have not reached out to Daniel's former roommate, but one day, his alias, Nixon O'Neill, reached out to me. Here's my conversation with Anthony Christopher the day I got the message in my inbox. Did I tell you that today I received not a harassing message, but a spoof message in my email? Did I tell you about that?
No, this is absolutely wild. I can already assume where it came from.
So the title is Missy Witt Case, okay? And tell me if you recognize this email. Nixon O'Neill, 78.
Nixon O'Neill, that's ironic. So Nixon O'Neill is the pseudonym that she gives for Nathan Oliver, who she claims was the roommate to Daniel Watson.
Yeah.
Who was an early suspect in the Missy Witt case.
I did a check on this email. This email doesn't exist. It's a spoof email, 100%. And the message said, Javier, I appreciate your coverage on the Missy Witt case. I grew up in the area and you seem to be an expert on the case. Do you have time to compare notes? In my 45 years living in Arkansas and being familiar with this 30-year-old case, you must be a genius. Regards, Nixon. I have to remind people that today is May 30th. The podcast hasn't even come out yet, and I'm already getting messages.
I wish I could say I was shocked, Javier. You would think that the obvious person, especially in this case, being exposed for being behind emails and anonymous sources, would not use that same technique to go after an individual who she knows is exposing the use of these behaviors. And within moments, like you said, before your podcast is even out, you're receiving spoof and anonymous messages. It's wild to me.
I'm not a betting man, but my money is that Daniel Watson's roommate, Nathan Oliver, didn't write that email.
You know, what's unfortunate, Javier, is I think that LaDonna would be the individual that would be in a courtroom and they would have exact video and audio footage implicating her and proving her guilt in a crime. And that woman would still look at a jury and lie to their face and tell you it wasn't her.
Daniel Watson was uneasy to talk to me. He doesn't want to be on my podcast or her podcast. He just wants to be left alone. But he also wants to get ahead of this.
She has spent at least 4 years of my life harassing me. This all makes me nervous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it makes everybody nervous, man. It makes everybody.
How could it not? She's trying to frame me for murder. I didn't do, man. I'm like, my life is full. I got a 4-year-old daughter that if this affects my kid's life in any way, I'm going to go crazy.
When we come back, we're going to talk about a very famous case and how LaDonna tried to suggest that the victim's family might be responsible for the murder. That's after the break. You may be familiar with the case of Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student who disappeared February 2004 after a car accident on Route 112 in New Hampshire. She was pulled over after losing control of her car and crashed into a snowbank. Passerbys called the police, but Maura vanished before the authorities arrived. Her disappearance remains one of the most baffling and unsolved missing persons cases in the United States. Her story was featured on CNN, ABC's 2020, Nancy Grace. It was around this time that LaDonna Humphrey first contacted the Murray family.
Well, on November 20th, 2006, and I'm going to be very specific here with these dates and times because I've provided you with all of these emails. We got an inquiry into the Maura Murray, I think it was mauramurray.com at that point. And it was from LaDonna, and she was offering help.
LaDonna Humphrey asked if her nonprofit, called Let's Bring Them Home, can help.
And at that point in 2006, early 2007, LaDonna wanted to do a national PR campaign to get the word out about Maura's still missing. And so we're like, okay, we're not in a position to turn down help. So that started our relationship with LaDonna.
In one of her correspondence, she told them, "I'm willing to help stir as much attention as possible if you would like me to. Someone out there has to know where she is. Someone knows something." So the Murray family, desperate for answers, accepted LaDonna's help.
So there wasn't a whole lot of movement until 2007 when LaDonna proposed offering up a $75,000 reward.
And the Murray family, desperate for answers, accepted LaDonna's help.
So my aunt, Helena, by marriage, she was the administrator for this site. So she was the one that would respond to these messages and so on and so forth. We didn't really know how rewards worked. We were, fresh into this tragedy, and we knew that it could possibly generate leads, but we weren't exactly sure of the legalities. So LaDonna assured Helena that they had a liability insurance for the nonprofit at the time, Let's Bring Them Home. So she provided us with the liability insurance, which I provided you. But we also wanted to see that the funds existed. So one of the things that Helena wanted to ensure was that there was a dedicated account earmarked for this particular purpose, so that if tips came in and we had to pay out, that my family was protected.
I mean, it seems reasonable to ask, where was the money coming from? Was proof of insurance good enough? But the Murray family was still concerned about the money, and they wanted to make sure that their family wasn't going to be held liable.
So that's when Helena reached out to her friend who was a lawyer. And the lawyer said, if you don't see this dedicated earmarked bank account, then what you could do as a family is do up a letter of indemnification to protect against any liability. So we did that. And so we had the liability insurance documents, which I provided you, and we had the letter of indemnification. So at that point, we're thinking, okay, we're covered. So we've got the documentation in order. We feel good about going forward with the reward. So on August 4th, 2007, a press release was issued, and it was issued through the end of the year. So the reward would end on December 31st of 2007. And that's in the press release.
The day that press release was issued, another nonprofit reached out to the Murrays and warned them about LaDonna.
Interesting part of her email to Helena was this chilling message warning my family about LaDonna personally.
This person wrote, "You need legal documentation that this money exists, that there's a bank account earmarked for this purpose. If the reward funds is bogus, the money does not really exist, and any tipster that comes forward with any information and is not paid, that tipster can sue the family and anyone connected to the reward fund." But this person offered a chilling warning. Let me read you the email. "I have been told by more than one highly reputable person in the business that this woman is mentally ill. She sounds like a sociopath to me. We won't have anything to do with her or her organization, and we will not refer anyone to them. I trust you not relay from whom you received this info. She has been known to attack reputable organizations and family members, and I don't want her after us. I don't want to see families mixed up with her. I care deeply for you and felt like I had to say something."
At that point, we had already put out the press release. I mean, the train was out of the station. So there was nothing that we could do. But we felt confident that, okay, we've got this indemnification, we've got this proof of insurance, and it's only 5 months. So how bad could it be? And if it generates a couple tips and we get something to go on, okay. So we weren't too concerned at that point.
And that's the same day that the first tip came in, right?
Right. Yep. The first tip comes in on August 7th. And let me just explain how the tip system worked. So there was a toll-free number that people could call, and it wasn't answered by a person. It was answered by an automated voice message machine. And tipsters could leave their tips in a recording. So those audio files go to LaDonna, and then she would forward those to my Aunt Helena. And that's how it worked.
LaDonna is acting as a middleman here, right?
Right. So in total, there were six tips in total forwarded to my family. So we had 2 come in on August 7th. I have all the audio files, and it was kind of information we already knew, but we went ahead and forwarded it to the detectives. Tip number 5 is the one that's curious. So tip number 5 came in on September 29th, 2007. And in this particular tip, there's no caller number listed, which is different than all the other tips that I sent to you. But it did have an audio file, and I listened to it, and it is from a local woman providing some information.
What kind of information? I think people are going to be curious about it.
Yeah, this was a woman that worked in a local establishment in the town that my sister disappeared, and she noticed, I think this one was a man come into her store. So this tip was the only tip that I have on record that LaDonna forwarded directly to my dad. So she forwards this to my dad on October 3rd, 2007 at 1:14 a.m. After that February 14th, 2008, we don't have a whole lot of communication or any written anyways with LaDonna. The reward had expired. We only got 6 tips, and we kind of went on our ways. I mean, it was worth the effort to try to do the reward to see if anything materialized, but it really didn't.
In the end, LaDonna never reached back out again. There was no notification once the reward expired or any communication to the family about what happened to the money.
So we don't hear from LaDonna again until a decade later. And that is on March 27th, 2018, where LaDonna resurfaces and provides her friend and associate an email of the tip I just described from September 29th, 2007. And it's used as evidence that my dad wanted to monitor all tips. And she goes on to say that my dad was hostile and controlling and difficult to work with. And that because of those reasons, she rescinded the reward.
And what is the implication there? What kind of message is she trying to send 10 years later?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know why all of a sudden that happened. But in the email that she provided her friend, it's very different than the actual original email. So on the email that she provided her friend as evidence that my dad was controlling, it includes a line at the bottom, and it says,
forward all calls to me immediately before you listen to them.
Yes. Now, I have all my Aunt Helena's and all my dad's emails, and I don't have a record of my dad sending an email. And what's also curious about this is if you look at the email that she provided, it's actually from her to my dad. So she's using this email from herself to my dad and this extra line at the bottom to imply that these are the reasons why the Murray family is suspicious and controlling, and she no longer wants to work with my family. And so I've tried to understand where this email came from. I even reached out to LaDonna and asked her, do you have that email? I don't have that. Here's the original. And they look different. And there's a few little key pieces of the email that she provided her friend that are very different. I mean, the time is different. On her email, it says 4:28 a.m. On the original email, it says 1:14 a.m. There's the letters at that are on the email she provided that are not on the original email. So there's a bunch of little curious things.
Yeah, and I took a look at the email myself, and I'm not any, digital forensic expert, but the F's in the from in the header, they're slightly different sizes. Like you pointed out, @ sign is in one on the top of the email, but not at the bottom. It's spelled out. There's also like strange artifacts, and I don't know if that's because it's been screen captured, but it almost looks like there was information that had been deleted. And why would Fred Murray email himself? There was a lot. I mean, there was a lot there that initially it looks like a real email, but then when you start picking it apart, and you've showed me the original email, right? And that message was not there.
No. So the significance of this is that this was weaponized against my family, and it was referenced and reposted and republished many times as evidence that my family is suspicious. And so obviously I want to know why. I don't understand why I wasn't able to get an explanation. I sent LaDonna an email. I provided that to you. And of course, I didn't get any response. So as I sit here today, I just want an explanation. I just want to know, where did this come from? And if I could see that, then I could maybe make it make sense. But right now, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's crazy because what motivates someone 10 years later to make these kinds of accusations against a family that's gone through so much? Like, what is there for her to gain from this?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
That true crime author and blogger took the post down. But I want to read to you what LaDonna said in that blog post. Fred, Maura's dad, was difficult, often hostile, very controlling. I did everything he told me to do, and that was the extent of the relationship. He would only talk to me when he felt like it, and if he felt like it. I found him to be difficult, and at times I was helping dozens of other families like this. It was strange. I never felt like I was getting the full story. They were all secretive. It frustrates me because I did a lot of interviews for them back then about the reward in Maura's case. I backed out of the case slowly and have never spoken to anyone again about this until I emailed you. LaDonna ended her statement by saying, I ended up pulling the reward about 3 months later. I wasn't trying to be ugly to the family, but there were just too many demands put upon our organization by the Murray family. All right, so those were two different stories. You listened to Daniel Watson's story, and then you listened to Julie Murray's story. And you might be asking yourself, what do those two stories have in common? It almost seemed like two different episodes. Well, I felt that it was important to tell those stories together because in the case of Daniel Watson, he feels like he's being framed for a crime that he says he didn't commit. And in the case of Julie Murray, this is a family who, has received a lot of media attention. LaDonna reached out to them. She offered her help. And then years later, almost like in the Allen arson investigation, LaDonna shows up 10 years later to badmouth this family. What motivated that? Where did that come from? Anyways, I hope you are enjoying the podcast. This is episode 5, right? And I am going to take a little bit of a break, maybe a week, maybe a little longer. And then we're going to come back with a whole new batch of episodes, including my interview with LaDonna Humphrey and my interviews with some of her supporters, and then some other controversies that kind of popped up as this production of this podcast was unfolding. So very interesting stuff. Lots of things are in the works, so stay tuned. Thank you again to everyone who has supported the show, left comments on social media. We couldn't do this without you, honestly. LaDonna and her surrogates, they say, hey, look at this guy posting this podcast and putting it on Patreon and Plus on Apple Podcasts, and he's just trying to make a buck. Well, so is every podcast out there and YouTube channel, okay? This is a very small, independent podcast. The amount of hours that my team and I put into this, trust me, we are not making that money. I still have a full-time job. And we are busting our butts to do independent journalism. And I appreciate every one of you who supports it, who thinks that this kind of work is important. For me, I consider myself a victim advocate for real, And when I see allegations of people who may be taking advantages of families like the Maura Murray's family and taking advantage of other families like the Maura Murray family, that really is a passion of mine, okay? And I couldn't fit all of my interview with Julie Murray in this episode, but we had this second fascinating conversation about a previous case that I worked on. And if you're a listener of the show, you might remember my series on Dr. Arpad Bas. What did I call it? The Grave Detector or something like that? If you haven't listened to it, check it out because it's kind of similar to this. But Julie and I talked about it. Her and her family were also approached by Dr. Arpad Bas to use the quantum oscillator to find Maura Murray. And let me tell you something, it checks out with all the other stories I heard. I'm going to post that bonus interview on Patreon. If you want to listen to my interview with LaDonna Humphrey, that's part 6 and part 7. It's available right now. Plus, there's a couple new bonus episodes, so go check those out. So stay tuned and thank you for listening. Because of your support, as of this recording, Pretend is in the top 20 in Spotify charts in the true crime category and top 200 in the US and Canada. That is unbelievable. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. This episode, of course, was written and produced by me, Javier Leiva. It was also produced by Alison Byrne. And our theme song was written and produced by Joe Basile with thechicken.net and edited by the talented Punit Shenoy with the Podcast Pundits. If you are impressed with the editing in these episodes, you should send Punit Shenoy a message on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. His handle is Shenoy, SHENOY _Punith, PUNEETH. Give him a shout out. He's an awesome editor. He literally drops everything he's doing just to work on my show, and I so much appreciate his help. So thank you, Punith. Thank you, Alison. Thank you to all my listeners, and I'm out.
Creative Babble.